Hello, friends. Welcome to yet another special episode of AMR Dialogues. These dialogues are hosted by CNS and Global AMR Media Alliance, or GAMA as we call it. AMR Dialogues feature conversations with AMR leaders from around the world, including AMR survivors, AMR scientists and researchers, and others engaged in raising awareness about AMR, that is, antimicrobial resistance, which is one of the top global public health threats. Our guest for today is MASHOOD LAWAL, former Director of Food and Drug Services at Federal Ministry of Health, Nigeria. MASHOOD is a clinical pharmacist and an AMR survivor, and also a member of the World Health Organization Task Force of Antimicrobial Resistance Survivors. Welcome, MASHOOD. It is such an honor to have you with us today. MASHOOD, can you please share your personal lived experience of the devastating impact of antimicrobial resistance?
Thank you. My experience started not with an infection. My experience started with another ailment. I developed kidney stone. And after proper diagnosis, I opted for lithotripsy, that is the use of laser technology to treat it instead of going for an open surgery. This was in 2020, August. But somehow, the technology failed me within the hospital premises where I did it. And eventually, I was open. That is, I had to go for open surgery to eventually remove the stone. The stone was removed, and I was placed on prophylaxis of antibiotics. I had augmentin, I had metronidazole, IV, and eventually when on discharge, I had the tablets. I was on it for about 2 weeks. But the kidney stone had caused what is known as nephrohydrosis. That is, some quantity of water had gathered in my kidney, and there was need to drain that water. So a stent, which is a very tiny tube, was inserted between my kidney and my bladder. And 3.5 months after the surgery, I had to go back to the hospital for its removal. Having done an X-ray to confirm that the kidney was free of water, a day was fixed for me to remove it. I did it in November on a Saturday. It was removed under light anesthesia. It was removed without any prophylactic use of antibiotic. And I went home that very day. But barely 48 hours later, to be precise, on a Monday, for the following Monday, I developed high body temperature. I was shivering, I was having cold. And I approached my wife. Is the weather cold? She responded, the weather is not cold, that I'm the one that was sick. And actually, unknown to me, I was actually sick. So as a tradition within our environment, the first suspicion or culprit, I will say this time around, was malaria. So without seeing any doctor, I took an antimicrobial combination therapy combination, used it, and I felt all right. But about 2 or 3 days after completing the treatment, the temperature came back. All the symptoms resurfaced, and I had to go to a local laboratory. Again, not surprising, the outcome was malaria and typhoid, because you at least submit your blood sample for analysis on without the coming out, especially in the local laboratories around, coming out with typhoid and malaria. So I opted for another combination of ACT with different composition. They commenced ciprofloxacin, 500 milligrams, that is 2 times a day. And I felt all right. But about 5 or so days later, these symptoms resurfaced. No, even more than 5 days, because I used the ciprofloxacin for about a week. So at this point, I contacted my consultant urologist who handled my case. And after listening to me, he asked me to go back to augmenting 1 gram, which I took. About 10 days later, when I felt I was all right, the symptoms resurfaced. At this point, he asked me to come for microbial sensitivity test, which I did. And the result was heavy growth of Escherichia coli. So by then, other symptoms have come up. I started having some sensation within my urinary system, and it was sensitive to another antibiotic several times. And I went for the best brand in the market on his advice. Surprisingly, I felt all right, but about 10 days later, the symptoms came back. So while we did the test again, it shows that it was still heavy growth of Escherichia coli. So while I was on this, I had a terrible dream. A friend visited me. I was down. A few days later, that friend was diagnosed with COVID. And it was after his visit that I had a dream. And after his diagnosis, so I woke up and told my wife, who was the only person with me, that I shall be going for PRC test for COVID-19. Eventually, I went, and I was diagnosed as being positive. So I was admitted into an Elite isolation center. But listening to my recent medical history, they could not keep me there. And it was good they did not keep me there. So eventually I had to go to a tertiary health institution in the country. So when I got there, I was treated for COVID with all the antibiotics. The word was confused at that time. They didn't know what to give. I was taking all sorts of antibiotics and other medications, including meropenem. IV, I was on it. I was placed on oxygen for a week. It was not terrible. And I did another test, urine test there again, and blood culture. The urine test came out again, heavy growth of Escherichia coli. This time now sensitive to levofloxacin. I went for the leading brand globally. I was on the IV, later on placed on the tablet. Eventually, the medics at the center were convinced that my ailment, my COVID-19 was no longer the issue, that it was my initial ailment that was giving me the persistent temperature. So I was discharged after about 17 days in the isolation center. So I went back to my doctor. Now he now directed that I should go for another urine culture. And the result was still heavy growth of Escherichia coli. No, sorry, there is a mix-up. The laboratory I went to, a very big private laboratory in the country, said it was Staph aureus. So when I reported back to meanwhile, when they did the sensitivity test, the supposed Staph aureus was not sensitive to most of their antibiotics. So they apologized and asked me to go to another branch of their laboratory within the city to repeat the test. I did. And surprisingly, it came out with the same profile. So as if it was just copied. But that was what we got after 3 days of incubation. So I went back to my physician, and he now told me that I should not mind it. That should be a contaminant within their system. I was going through these processes, and I was suffering. High temperature, sweating, to urinate was a problem. So to eat, everything was scattered. So at the end of the day, he directed me to another laboratory. This time around, the laboratory confirmed that it was Escherichia coli. Now sensitive to some of the carbapenems. But there was confusion because the use of them would require me being hospitalized and with some of their severe side effects. So, but luckily for us, one of the antibiotics for which it was sensitive, a reserved, let me call it a reserved antibiotic, I will not mention his name, which were in our discussion with him when I was at the clinic, we did not give much attention to. As you said, I'm a clinical pharmacist. So, but when I got home, I picked my books, Google about the antibiotic. And I discovered that this is noted to be specific for Escherichia coli, multi-drug resistant Escherichia coli. And having been sensitive to it, I gave a call to my consultant who asked me whether it's available. Meanwhile, before I called him, I had made contact to drug marketers in Nigeria who confirmed the availability and the place I could get it. So I told him, and he asked me to go for it. I went for it. It's a dose the dog has to take between every 48 hours or 72 hours. As a sick and desperate person in need of healing, I opted for 48 hours. And after the first dose, there was marked improvement. By the time I finished the third dose, my urine was sterile. There was no single antimicrobial in my urine. That was how I came out of antimicrobial resistance. The experience was devastating. It was life-threatening. Even COVID was, if I was involved with COVID, I contracted COVID. But I think what I went through with AMR was greater than that of COVID. In fact, because of the suffering I went through. So that's the story of my antimicrobial resistance survivor. I've said it like this on the internet. I pray I do not experience it again. And and I do not pray for anybody to go through it. Because when we read some of these amens and there's symptoms, signs and symptoms in our books, as those of us in medical life, we really don't know the gravity of what we are reading. Except you have gone through it, or you have been very, very close to someone who had gone through it, and maybe you are a caregiver. That is when you know that some of these amens we read in our textbooks are really terrible things. Thank you. That's my story.
No.
And just give me the opportunity to be member of the WHO committee, which was done on advertisement, expression of interest, and I was selected among the 12 for the first committee, which is still on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really a hair-raising story you have related to us, and the amount of suffering you went through, and also the medical expenses. So what do you think should be done that if there is resistance to drugs, shouldn't it be found out or tested early on in the treatment? What do you have to say to that? You went for multiple testing to see whether the drugs you were taking were resistant, the bacteria was resistant to them or not.
Thank you. The principle of management in medicine is that, especially with antimicrobial, with infections, our recommendation of the WHO is that efforts should be made to do early microbial sensitivity test before commencement of drug. But in some instances, you may have to go for empirical treatment based on established procedures in order to bring some relief to the, I'm hoping that the antimicrobial, the microbial will be sensitive to the antimicrobial that has been prescribed. But the target, the goal should be to carry out an early scientific test. You get this? So like my own case, maybe after giving the history of having used Cipotab, my physician should have just suggested I come in straight for a sensitivity test before recommending augmenting. Thank you.
Yes, but that is not happening, and that is leading to so much of suffering. And you could go to the best of hospitals. There would be so many people who are not even able to reach tertiary care hospitals. So, do you think that the response to address antimicrobial resistance should be more people-centric and not just medicalized and not just remain in the books, but involve the people and common public more? Do you have any suggestion for that? Yes.
Thank you. The WHO is already on that, which is why this committee of mine, which my member is, and other member nations with their action plan. The first pillar is awareness campaign, advocacy and awareness campaign, which we hope will be heightened with this WHO committee. And as a member of the committee from Nigeria, I'm already doing that, liaising with the Nigerian Center for Disease Control on how to domesticate the WHO concept of type 4 survivors. And I also used every opportunity I had to present my case, not only to the medics, but to the general members of the public on the threat that antimicrobial resistance poses to the survival of the human being. So the global health in particular.
Right. So we are having this year the UN HLM on AMR in September in New York. The UN at the UN General Assembly, the high-level meeting on AMR. So what are your expectations and message for the leaders, our country heads who will be there at that high-level meeting, which is going to take place on AMR? Yes, please.
The momentum has been increased. Several pre-meetings have been held in New York, in London. I was in that one in London in May at the Royal Society. We got to pay attention to so many things. Number one is infection prevention control, IPC. Because if there's no infection, you don't need antibiotics. So we must provide means that will reduce infections. Simple things as water, proper sanitation go a long way to prevent infection. We must improve standards in our hospitals. Possibly, if there has been a proper IPC, I would not have got infected when I went for the removal of the stent. We must also work to improve confidence in public health facilities, especially the third world country. Because it is a lack of confidence in public health centers that makes people to go outside to search for health care. And there must be improvement in enforcement of regulation on accessibility to medicine. And Nigeria and most of the third world LMIC countries, everybody can just go anywhere. Anybody can just go anywhere and say, give me ampiclos. And they do close rate. They will not even ask for a complete course of ampiclos. They give me 2 capsules of ampiclos. Some women believe that by the time they had an unprotected sex, taking 2 capsules of ampiclos, we save them from infection. Some feel they need to prevent infection generally, so they take antibiotics when it's not even necessary. So member nations and the UN, we have to address these issues. Our public facility, not only public facility, there must be adherence to guidelines and standards. Regulatory agencies saddled with standards in lab must ensure that anybody that aspires to operate a laboratory service has the minimal requirement to prevent misdiagnosis. There must be continual education, because the lab I went to where there was a laboratory misdiagnosis, is not that they don't have the means, but maybe the capacity, the knowledge of the health workers gives significant difference of an E. coli and a Escherichia coli in terms of structure. So one would have expected a microbiologist, whatever level, to be able to, just looking at the shape, know that this cannot be cooker. It's a bacillus. So there's need for improved capacity building, and we should continue. So we should not get tired of advocacy and awareness campaign, especially among the low-income earner. You get it? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for your very, very important and pertinent suggestions, Mashood, because each word which you have said, what needs to be done and tackled at the level of the government, and then filter down to each hospital and every health facility. Very, very important points, Mashood. And thank you very much for finding
If
time
I
to...
may add, let's add a bit. We
Yes,
also need to work on our health workers.
yes,
They need to also adhere to regulations and guidelines on the use of these antibiotics. Especially, not even only antibiotics, but talking about antibiotics, but generally drugs. There is a tendency towards polypharmacy, which all along, for any pharmacy student, medical student, is not something that is encouraged. So if you must use an antibiotics empirically, do your proper studies, follow the guidelines on what are the recommended drugs to be taken. You get it? Then they should always be conscious. Frameworks should be instituted to encourage physicians to follow guidelines, because research work, which I've happened to have done one, shows that it's not that people are not aware of these guidelines, but when they want to prescribe, they don't make recourse to it, which creates problem. And then we must work ensure that medicines to be used, antimicrobial to be used, are of the right standard and quality. So big healthcare facilities to be able to have a mini quality control laboratory to carry out random check on their products. So that's my advice.
yes. Thank you very much. And one very important thing you said was to restore the trust and faith of the people in the public health system, so that they do not go here and there and they seek medical care and advice at the proper time. And then, of course, obviously, the clinics, the doctors, clinicians should respond in the way which you have been talking about today. Laboratory strengthening. Each word you said is so very important, Mashood, and I'm sure if the guidelines are there, but unless they are implemented at the ground level, at every stage of the treatment, they will just remain on paper. So it is important. It is important to have the guidelines. More important to implement them. I I think that is very important. That's the crux of your message also. So thank you very much for being with us today and letting our listeners know on why it is critical to curb this rising menace of antimicrobial resistance. Friends, we were listening to MASHOOD LAWAL, former Director, Food and Drug Services at Federal Ministry of Health, Nigeria. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.